Thurl Bailey was an unconventional big man ahead of his time, standing at 6'11" and not being forced under the rim as he was slimmer with a jump shot, playing power forward and small forward, getting out in the run for dunks, and could guard multiple positions as he was agile. Bailey was extremely tough to stop on offense because if you put a smaller player on him to defend him outside, he would just go post them up and shoot over them. If you were to put a bigger guy on him, Thurl would pull him out, hitting jump shots, or go right around him to the rim for a dunk, and oftentimes dunking on anyone in his way, helping create a successful career for himself that started at the college level as he led North Carolina State on one of the most improbable runs in basketball history to win the NCAA championship, defeating multiple household names today, surviving and advancing barely each game. Going down as one of the more iconic players in college basketball history on one of its most iconic teams in history, getting Bailey noticed by the NBA for leading the Wolfpack to the championship, going on to get drafted by the Utah Jazz, where he would spend the majority of his career with them as the sixth man, being one of the best in the league, averaging just under 20 a game, finishing second for Sixth Man of the Year twice, where Bailey would help the Jazz reach the playoffs every year he was with the team, and often elevated his play in the playoffs, winning the Jazz multiple big games and series because of his play, being an Ironman in his tenure with the team, before bouncing around some to end his career, getting one final season with the Jazz to walk it all off. This is a look back on Thurl Bailey's career. Thurl Bailey was born in Washington, D.C., growing up nearby in Bladensburg, Maryland. Bailey did not pick up the game of basketball until his early teens after watching Julius Erving play on TV, wanting to be just like him, deciding to dedicate himself to the game. Bailey struggled early on, getting cut from his basketball team his 7th and 8th grade year despite having a lot of his size already, before finally making the team, initially only playing for the jump ball, but would continually develop, and by Bailey's senior season he was a top prospect in the area, getting recruited and ultimately decided to attend North Carolina State to play for Norm Sloan, who several years prior had won the NCAA tournament with the school. Bailey was a part of a freshman class with lots of future potential in himself, Derek Wittenberg, and Sidney Lowe, yet none of them played significant minutes early on. Thurl Bailey would play as a backup forward for most of the season, averaging 4.5 points and 3.6 rebounds for an NC State team that went 20-8, making the NCAA tournament as the 4th seed, where they would find themselves getting bounced in their first game to Iowa, who ended up reaching the Final Four, in a game where Bailey did not have much of an impact, having 2 points and 3 rebounds. In the offseason, Donald Sloan would get into a contract dispute and would leave the school for Florida. NC State, to replace Sloan, would bring in head coach Jim Valvano. Thurl Bailey was initially hesitant to stay after the coaching change, but after his first meeting with Valvano, Bailey was convinced to stay after him telling his dream of winning an NCAA championship. Thurl Bailey under Valvano would come the main guy on offense his sophomore season, leading the team in scoring, rebounding, and blocks at 12.3 points, 6.1 rebounds, and 1.6 blocks for an NC State team that had got chewed up in conference play, going 14-13, missing the NCAA tournament. Bailey, his junior season, kept on as the team leader in each of the 3 categories with 13.7 points, 6.8 rebounds, and 1.4 blocks, making second team All-ACC, as NC State kept improving after adding Kozel McQueen, Lorenzo Charles, and Terry Gannon, going 22-10, making the tournament as a 7th seed, but would swiftly be sent home by Willie White in Chattanooga. Thurl Bailey continued to improve his senior season, averaging 16.7 points, 2.6 blocks, 7.7 rebounds, making first team All-ACC for a North Carolina State team that had high expectations entering the year, looking strong to the start of the season, before Wittenberg went down with an injury, seeing the team dip in his absence before his return. Looking on the outside of the NCAA tournament, entering the ACC tournament, needing to win it to make the NCAA tournament. The first round of the ACC tournament brought Wake Forest, which would be a close one as the game was tied up down the stretch with Wake Forest holding for the final shot. But North Carolina State would trap and steal the ball, going down the court, getting fouled, sending Charles to the line, who was one of the team's poorer free throw shooters, who would hit the second free throw, sending the Wolfpack to round 2, which brought the defending national champions in 5th-ranked North Carolina with Michael Jordan, Sam Perkins, and Brad Daugherty. NC State would hang around throughout, with Jordan fouling out near the end of regulation, with the game tied up and a couple seconds remaining as North Carolina had the ball, where Sam Perkins would get the shot off, barely missing, seeing the game go to overtime. North Carolina jumped out on North Carolina State to start overtime, being up 6 with a couple minutes to go, and remind you, no shot clock. The NC State decided to foul, and UNC would continuously miss free throw after free throw, and Wittenberg got hot down the stretch, helping NC State upset North Carolina to make the ACC championship game versus Virginia, who were second ranked in the country, led by one of the best college basketball players of all time in Ralph Sampson. North Carolina State would find itself down midway through the second half before NC State would switch things up, going to a triangle and 2 on Sampson, seeing NC State slowly creep back into the game, winning the game late after Gannon strips Sampson, sealing the game. Thurl Bailey and NC State were ACC champions, doing the improbable, making the NCAA tournament, getting a 6th seed. Round 1 brought Dane Settle and Pepperdine, and NC State entered the game lacking their normal punch after being put in a bad hotel, with Pepperdine looking like they were going on to upset them round 1, being up 6 in overtime with a minute to go and no shot clock, so NC State had to start fouling again, and they would foul Settle, which was Pepperdine's best player and free throw shooter, but he would miss twice, giving NC State a chance to tie it. The following possession, NC State got fouled, sending Wittenberg to the line, who would surprisingly miss, but McQueen came up with the rebound, scoring his first points of the game, sending it to double overtime. And in double overtime, North Carolina State held on and won by 2, living by the moniker Survive and Advance, as Bailey was the second leading scorer on the team with 17 points. Round 2, North Carolina State met Sidney Green and UNLV, who had only lost twice all season, where before the game Green had commented about the matchup against Bailey, asking who Thurl Bailey was, lighting a fire under the team. NC State during the game found itself trailing by 12 in the second half, before Bailey led a comeback, scoring 25 points to go with his 9 rebounds, and Thurl Bailey capped it all off on the comeback, scoring a putback with 4 seconds to go, giving NC State the victory. After another comeback victory, the team got the nickname the Cardiac Pack. In the Sweet 16, North Carolina State had its first game in a long time that did not require a late comeback, winning comfortably over Utah, getting into the Elite 8 in a matchup against none other than Ralph Sampson and Virginia. Sampson came out with vengeance on his mind, helping Virginia hold the lead up 7 with 7 minutes to go, which by this point was a lot of time for NC State to make another comeback, rallying back into the game behind Wittenberg and tying it up with a minute and a half to go. Virginia began to hold for the final shot, so NC State decided to foul again. Virginia converted on one of the 2 free throws, giving the Wolfpack a chance. The following possession, Lorenzo Charles got fouled, who, let me remind you, was a poor free throw shooter, where again he came through on the line, hitting both, giving NC State the lead and subsequently the victory, as NC State the following possession kept the ball away from Sampson. Surviving another day, keeping the Cinderella story alive, making the Final Four to play Vern Fleming in Georgia, where NC State put together one of its best games yet, winning 67-60 behind Thurl Bailey's 20 points and 10 rebounds, making the NCAA championship game to play against one of the best college teams of all time in the Houston Cougars, better known as Phi Slamma Jamma, led by Akeem Olajuwon, Clyde Drexler, and Michael Young. NC State entered the game as big-time underdogs, with most thinking they did not stand a chance. Yet the game would start and the Wolfpack came out with great intensity, throwing Houston off their rhythm, even getting Drexler into foul trouble, helping NC State enter halftime up 8. Then the second half came around and Houston woke up as Olajuwon led the charge, being too much to handle down low. Houston would go up 7 points, yet puzzlingly, Houston started to slow its normal fast pace down, trying to take time off the clock, and NC State did what it always did best, started rallying, tying the game up as Houston had the ball with roughly a minute to go, holding for the final look, so NC State decided to foul again, and Houston would miss, giving North Carolina State the ball for the final shot. The final possession was a jumbled one, as NC State was struggling with a zone that was trapping, that ended with a deep shot from Wittenberg, who airballed, but Lorenzo Charles grabbed the miss, dunking it at the buzzer, upsetting Houston, becoming NCAA champions in a game that Thurl Bailey scored a team-high 15 points, helping NC State go down as one of the all-time Cinderella stories, not just in basketball, but in all of sports. Thurl Bailey, for his part, made an NCAA all-tournament team, and had shot his stock up the NBA draft boards as he was a versatile power forward / small forward standing at 6'11" who could get out in the run with the best, slamming on anyone, and in the half court Bailey could score in the post coupled with a mid-range jump shot. And on top of everything, teams liked his character. In the 1983 NBA draft, with the 7th overall pick, the Utah Jazz selected Thurl Bailey. Bailey was joining a Utah Jazz team looking to make its first playoff appearance with the core of Adrian Dantley, Ricky Green, Darrell Griffith, Mark Eaton, and John Drew. Thurl Bailey would split time his rookie season between starting and coming off the bench to average 8.5 points and 5.7 rebounds, making all-rookie first team, while playing for a Jazz team that had its first winning season in existence, going 45-37, making the playoffs for the first time in team history as a 2 seed. Round 1 brought a series against the Denver Nuggets led by Alex English, Dan Issel, and Kiki Vandeweghe, where the stars of the Nuggets came to play, jumping out to a 2-1 lead, needing one more win to knock the Jazz out of the playoffs. Headed to Denver for Game 4, the Jazz bounced back from the tough start to this series, winning the game as Bailey played his best game of the series, scoring 17 points and having 5 rebounds, creating a Game 5 in Utah where the Jazz rode the momentum behind Dantley to a victory, making it into Round 2 to play the Phoenix Suns with Walter Davis, Larry Nance, Maurice Lucas, and Alvin Adams. The Jazz would get off to a hot start, winning Game 1 as Bailey played the right-hand man to Dantley, scoring 26 points, coupled with 3 blocks, and grabbed a game-high 13 rebounds. However, the strong start, the Jazz went on to drop the next 3 games in heartbreaking fashion, as Game 3 was sent to overtime on a Walter Davis 3, and saw the team lose in overtime as Green missed a layup. Game 5, Utah bounced back thanks to a monstrous game from Dantley, but it was all too late though, as Phoenix would blow them out in Game 6, sending Utah home packing. Thurl Bailey in his first postseason experience had helped the Jazz win their first ever playoff series, stepping up his form to the regular season to average 10.6 points, 5.5 rebounds. In the offseason, the Jazz found a steal in the NBA draft, selecting John Stockton, but for now it was still Green's team at the point guard position. Thurl Bailey, his sophomore season, would end up taking a larger role on the team after they had released John Drew, who was dealing with substance abuse issues. Bailey became the 3rd leading scorer on the team at 15.2 points per game and 2nd on the team in rebounding and blocks with 6.6 rebounds and 1.3 blocks, helping the Jazz stay competitive as Dantley was battling injuries, going 41-41, making it back to the playoffs as a 6th seed this time, where Dantley would be healthy and available to play. Round 1, the Jazz met the Houston Rockets with Akeem Olajuwon and Ralph Sampson. Game 1, Utah would surprise the Rockets, taking it as Dantley was clicking and so was Bailey with 25 points and 10 rebounds. Game 2, Houston bounced back as the Jazz went cold from the floor, but they would not continue to be cold for long, finding their form again in Game 3, winning it as Bailey had another great game with 22 points, 11 rebounds, and 6 assists. Again, the Rockets bounced back behind the Twin Towers in a close one to force a Game 5. Game 5 back in Houston saw the Jazz's backs against the wall, entering half as Eaton picked up an injury. But Billy Paultz would come into the game and frustrate both of Houston's bigs, as the Jazz went on to win the game and the series after Bailey had another big game with 20 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists. Round 2, the Jazz met the Denver Nuggets, who had improved since their prior playoff series, adding Calvin Nat and Fat Lever, while still remaining the core of Alex English and Dan Issel. The series would be a fast-paced and high-scoring one, rivaling scores in the modern NBA, which favored the Nuggets' style of play, helping them defeat the Jazz comfortably 4-1, with the Jazz missing Eaton the whole entire series. Thurl Bailey continued his strong form in the playoffs against the Nuggets. It was just not enough in the end, as Bailey ended up averaging 16.9 points and 9.2 rebounds over the playoffs. In the offseason, the Jazz again selected well in the draft, taking Karl Malone, which would affect Thurl Bailey's playing time and touches, moving him to the bench to be the team's 6th man, where he'd average 14.6 points and 6 rebounds, for a Jazz team that would finish at a similar record to last season, going 42-40, because Darrell Griffith had missed the entire year with an injury, yet had made the playoffs as a 5 seed, where they would be quickly bounced round 1 by Mark Aguirre, Rolando Blackman, and the Dallas Mavericks, as the Jazz were without Griffith and Dantley with injuries. in a series where Thurl Bailey averaged 16 points and 8 rebounds. Over the offseason, things came to a boiling point between head coach Frank Layden and Adrian Dantley, as Layden questioned his injury for missing the playoffs and could not reach a contractual agreement, ending in Adrian Dantley being traded away for Kelly Tripucka. Next season, Thurl Bailey continued to be the backup, with his minutes being reduced further with the addition of Tripucka and the return of Griffith. Bailey went on to average 13.8 points and 5.3 rebounds. For a Jazz team that steadily kept improving behind Malone turning into a star, going 44-38, getting into the playoffs as a 4 seed to play the Golden State Warriors with Sleepy Floyd, Purvis Short, Joe Barry Carroll, and Chris Mullin. The Jazz got off to a hot start in the series thanks to its bench, as in Game 1, Bailey had led the way in scoring with 20 points, and in Game 2, Griffith led the team in scoring, helping the Utah Jazz go up 2-0. In a game that is most remembered for an all-out brawl at the end of the game, seeing fans, coaches, and players in the middle of it all. The Jazz would be headed to Golden State needing one more victory, but the Warriors proceeded to defend their home court and find new life behind Floyd and Short, tying the series up, sending it back to Utah to force a pivotal Game 5. In a game where the Golden State Warriors rode its newfound confidence in Carroll to victory in a close one, becoming the second team ever to come from down 2-0 to win a series. The Jazz found themselves on the wrong side of history, sent home packing. Thurl Bailey had a strong series despite the early exit, bumping up his averages to 15.6 points and 6 rebounds, while leading the postseason in free throw percentage at 100%, being a perfect 18 for 18 from the line, which was something he was always good at throughout his entire career. Next season, the Jazz would shake up its rotations, starting Stockton over Green, and had moved Thurl Bailey to the small forward position as Tripucka became out of favor with Layden, butting heads similar to that of what he'd done with Dantley. The move to the small forward position for Bailey paid off, as he would get more looks in the offense, coming off the bench as the sixth man still to become the second leading scorer on the team at 19.6 points to go with 6.5 rebounds, finishing second for Sixth Man of the Year to Roy Tarpley. In a season that also saw Thurl Bailey set his career high with 41 points in a victory versus Denver. The change to Stockton and moving Bailey to small forward off the bench saw the Jazz improve to 47-35, making the playoffs a 5 seed, meeting the Portland Trail Blazers round 1 with Clyde Drexler, Kevin Duckworth, Terry Porter, and Jerome Kersey. Thurl Bailey started the series off hot against Portland Game 1, leading with a game-high 31 points. However, his own personal success, the team couldn't counteract the well-balanced attack of Portland, winning the Blazers the game. After dropping Game 1, the Jazz elevated their play to the next level, winning 3 straight in the series as Karl Malone and Thurl Bailey dominated, with Bailey's best game being a 39-point, 8-rebound, 4-block Game 3 performance, helping get the Jazz into Round 2 to face the Los Angeles Lakers with Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Byron Scott, Michael Cooper, and James Worthy. Game 1, the Jazz would drop as they had a poor first quarter and could never bounce back, despite Bailey playing well, having 23 points and 8 rebounds. In Game 2, Thurl Bailey kept up his strong form, scoring 20 points and grabbing 6 rebounds, helping the Jazz steal a game in LA, tying the series up headed to Utah for Game 3. Game 3, Utah, headed by its trio of Malone, Stockton, and Bailey, playing their best basketball, would win in a game that saw Bailey score 21 points to go with 8 rebounds and 3 blocks. Just when the Jazz seemed in control of the series up 2-1 at home for Game 4, the Lakers retaliated, winning as they pulled away in the fourth quarter behind Worthy and Johnson. Game 5 would be a back-and-forth game throughout, seeing the Lakers lead late by 1, needing a basket. The Jazz would go to the hot hand in Thurl Bailey, who would have a game-high 28 points, scoring 2 of them with 12 seconds left on a jumper, putting the Jazz up 1, which was enough time for the Lakers to have a chance, and a chance was all they needed, seeing Magic drive, kicking it to Cooper, who hit the shot, winning the Lakers the game. Needing to win to stay alive Game 6, the Jazz trounced the Lakers for one of their worst playoff defeats, as Bailey continued his strong offensive form, scoring 20 points, forcing a Game 7 in LA, which unfortunately saw the team's season come to an end as Scott got hot, and the Lakers rode the momentum to victory, sending the Jazz home in Game 7. Afterwards, the Lakers went on to win the NBA championship, creating many what-ifs for the Utah Jazz. A large part of the Jazz's playoff success in almost taking down the eventual champions was Thurl Bailey, who had elevated his play when it mattered most, averaging 23.2 points, 2.1 blocks, and 5.7 rebounds. In the offseason, the Jazz decided to trade away Kelly Tripucka after he had fallen out of favor and had lost Ricky Green in the expansion draft after not protecting him, having Stockton running the point now in Utah. Early into the season also saw a coaching change as Layton stepped down and in came Jerry Sloan. All of the changing pieces did not change Bailey's role, as he would average 19.5 points and 5.5 rebounds off the bench, all to finish second for the Sixth Man of the Year award again, this time to Eddie Johnson, helping the Jazz go 51-31, making the playoffs as a 2 seed, getting a matchup against the 7-seeded Golden State Warriors headed by the duo of Chris Mullin and Mitch Richmond, where the Jazz would end up getting upset rather convincingly as Mullin got hot, guiding the Warriors to a sweep. Thurl Bailey's best game of the series was Game 1 as he had 27 points and 10 rebounds coming off the bench, but the following 2 games he would be inserted in the starting lineup, struggling to find similar success as he did coming off the bench offensively, ending up averaging 12 points and 8.3 rebounds over the series. In the offseason, the Jazz drafted Blue Edwards, which saw Edwards take away offensive touches from Bailey, seeing a dip in Thurl Bailey's numbers next season to 14.2 points and 5 rebounds for the Utah Jazz, as they had a better record than the year prior at 55-27, but entered the playoffs at a lower seed in a competitive Western Conference as a 4 seed, getting a playoff series against the Phoenix Suns led by Tom Chambers, Kevin Johnson, Dan Marley, Jeff Hornacek, and Eddie Johnson. The series would be tightly contested with big performances throughout from multiple players. Bailey's big performance came in Game 3, where he led the way in scoring with 30 points and a loss. As the series inevitably went to Game 5, which was, like the rest of the series, tight throughout, with the game being tied up late as Thurl Bailey had gone for 26 points and 7 rebounds. The Suns had the ball entering the final possession, and Kevin Johnson would play the role of the hero, hitting a game-winning jump shot with 0.8 seconds left, sending the Jazz home. Thurl Bailey this go-around in the postseason found success in a starting role, averaging 21 points and 6.4 rebounds. However, his efforts weren't enough against the team as balanced as the Suns. After another early exit, the Jazz knew they needed to bolster the rosters, so they went out and traded for Jeff Malone, who would help the team's offense, resulting in Thurl Bailey taking on a smaller role next season to average 12.4 points and 5 rebounds, as the Jazz went 54-28, making it back to the playoffs, a 5 seed, to face the Suns again round 1, who looked slightly different, trading Eddie Johnson for Xavier McDaniel. This time, Karl Malone would exact his revenge for last postseason, dominating the Suns, winning the series for the Jazz 3-1 as Jeff Malone and Stockton complimented him well. Round 2 brought a deep Portland Trail Blazers team who had improved since their last playoff meeting, adding Buck Williams and Clifford Robinson. The Blazers went on to jump out to a 2-0 series lead as Terry Porter hit a game winner with 3.5 seconds left and made the defensive stop on Stockton at the horn. Game 3, as like most of the postseason, Karl Malone dominated and winning the game for the Jazz. Game 4 was another close one, but Portland held on to a victory late as Drexler hit a big shot and stole the ball. In Game 5, the Blazers put away the Jazz 4-1 thanks to a big third quarter. Thurl Bailey this postseason found himself playing in a smaller role than that of the regular season to average 7.6 points and 3.6 rebounds. The following season would come around and Thurl Bailey was still in a reduced role, seeing him traded away after 13 games, ending his tenure in Utah that saw him play in all but 4 games over the past 8 seasons. Thurl Bailey was traded by the Utah Jazz with a second-round pick that became Tim Burrows to the Minnesota Timberwolves for Tyrone Corbin. Bailey was joining a struggling Timberwolves team in the early years of existence, led by Pooh Richardson, Tony Campbell, Sam Mitchell, and Doug West. Thurl Bailey was brought in as a backup power forward to be the team's 6th man, where he'd average 11.3 points and 5.8 rebounds. For the Timberwolves, who had a poor season going 15-67, missing the playoffs, which was a first for Bailey in his career. After the poor season, Minnesota shook things up, trading away Pooh Richardson and Sam Mitchell for Chuck Persons and Michael Williams, on top of the team drafting Christian Laettner. The additions saw Thurl Bailey take on a smaller role as he was aging to average 7.5 points and 3.1 rebounds as the Timberwolves remained bad, going 19-63. In the offseason, Minnesota again proved through the draft, selecting Isaiah Rider. Thurl Bailey remained in his backup role, averaging 7.4 points and 2.7 rebounds, with the Timberwolves doing slightly better, finishing at 20-62, missing the playoffs. In the offseason, Thurl Bailey was a free agent and would decide to head overseas after not garnering much NBA interest to play for Panionios in the Greek League, where he would star, playing well, making the Greek League All-Star team. The following season, Thurl Bailey would head to Italy to play for Polti Cantu in the Italian League for 2 seasons, which Bailey's shining moment with the team was winning the All-Star Game MVP before joining Olimpia Stefano Milano for a single season. All before, as a free agent at the age of 37, Thurl Bailey returned to the NBA to play for none other than the Utah Jazz. Bailey was joining a Jazz team that had just come off an NBA Finals appearance, still led by John Stockton and Karl Malone, but it added Jeff Hornacek and Brian Russell in his absence. Thurl Bailey's role was to back up Karl Malone at the power forward position, which did not mean much playing time as Malone usually was always on the court, resulting in Bailey averaging 4.2 points and 2.2 rebounds for a Jazz team in a lockout-shortened season that went 37-13, entering the playoffs as the 3 seed, to face Chris Webber, Vlade Divac, Jason Williams, Corliss Williamson, Peja Stojakovic, and the Sacramento Kings round 1. Game 1, the Jazz blew out the Kings behind a well-rounded team performance before the Kings went on to win the next 2 games behind Webber and Divac. Entering Game 4, the Jazz found themselves in a dogfight trying to avoid elimination, being in an electric game down the stretch with the lead changing back and forth, with the Kings holding the lead by 1 after Divac's free throw with 7 seconds to go, before John Stockton played the role of the hero, hitting a deep jumper with 0.7 seconds left, extending the series to a Game 5 in Utah, which ended up being another tightly contested contest that went to overtime before the Jazz would finally pull away, winning the game and the series, creating a round 2 matchup against a well-balanced Portland Trailblazers team with Rasheed Wallace, Isaiah Rider, Arvydas Sabonis, Brian Grant, and Damon Stoudemire. Utah would again find itself with its back against the wall, going down 3-1 as Rider was connecting from all over the floor. And this time the Jazz couldn't mount a comeback, losing in 6 games as the Blazers rode Rider into the next round. Thurl Bailey over the postseason played an identical role to that of the regular season, averaging 3.4 points and 1.4 rebounds off the bench for the Jazz. After the year was over, Bailey was thankful for the Jazz giving him one last go-around and decided to retire, ending his 12-year NBA career averaging 12.8 points, 5.1 rebounds, and 1.2 blocks. In retirement, Thurl Bailey stuck around the game of basketball with the Utah Jazz, being a broadcast analyst for their games. Thurl Bailey will be remembered for being ahead of his time in terms of his play style, being a taller forward at 6'11" who remained lean and versatile, manning the power forward and small forward position as he could knock down the mid-range jump shot with ease. If you put a smaller player on him to take away the outside, he would go to the post and turn around and shoot over the top of him. And if you put a big man who was slower on him, he would go around him to the rim or over the top with an emphatic dunk, while having the ability to defend most positions throughout his career as he was agile. In a career that started at North Carolina State, where he would help the Wolfpack on the most improbable Cinderella run of all time, taking down multiple household names to win the national championship after barely making the NCAA tournament, helping garner him notice for the NBA, getting drafted by the Utah Jazz where he'd spend most of his career, fitting in as the team's 6th man, averaging close to 20 points per game, reaching the playoffs every year with the Jazz being an ultimate Ironman throughout, hardly missing games. And in the playoffs, Bailey often elevated his play, being a large part of multiple playoff victories as the team's leading scorer and rebounder, before bouncing around to end his career, ending back in Utah for one final season, going down as a Utah Jazz fan favorite. Thanks for watching this video on Thurl Bailey's career. If you want to see any other videos about any other random players in the future, leave them in the comments below, and I may or may not decide to do them. Who knows? Thanks again for watching. This has been Skid Denver.